great to meet you, Chauncey.
Nice to meet you, Donna. Well, welcome to the garden. I moved to this house, 10 years ago in 2014, and it was basically a traditional ranch style home. It had a lawn in the front, a small lawn in back, and a big overgrown slope that was filled with blackberries and some giant rhododendrons. When I first planted this, it looked pretty pitiful. I really did it on kind of a shoestring. It's grown in very nicely now. You never know that. But when you do plant with conifers, I think it's really nice that most of them are dwarf. And that's because you get this longer period of enjoyment out of it. I've been a landscape designer for the past 15 years. And kind of one of my favorite things to do when I see plants that look good with other plants, that's their companion. I've always thought of planting like, does it have good color? Is it evergreen? Does it bloom? Does it have spring color or fall color? And like the more things that a plant can check off in those categories, it's like the better the plant. So as we make our way back here, all the paths on the property are this kind of open crushed rock, which allows the water to drain right through. And in the front, I've bordered it with steel. And then as we transition to the backyard, I've bordered them with larger chunks of basalt. So you'll kind of notice that transition as we move around the corner here. So I envision this space, it's just the little kind of service area between the house and the property line. I wanted some beautiful Japanese maples, and you're actually catching them at a great time because they're all in color right now. But they look really beautiful from these windows, which are a couple of bedrooms and a bathroom.
Okay. The scale here, it just makes me feel you know, like I'm going into this vast wonderland with like the little temple there, and then, you know, in the distance, the fire going. Oh, this one's so beautiful.
So this is an oriental spruce called Firefly. So it's actually a dwarf, slow growing, and it's a conifer that can take full sun, but here I'm actually growing it in quite a bit of shade other than that kind of blast of western sun at the end of the day.
Nice. Did you take any inspiration from any different culturals or historical gardens?
I did. It's a Japanese inspired garden.
Okay.
So kind of like our counterpart as far as growing regions is Japan. So a lot of these plants that are kind of more special, and like the Japanese maples and a lot of the conifers, those are native to Japan. So yes, I was definitely influenced heavily by Japanese design.
And I'm just curious, like, other than the plants, like, what about the design itself is Japanese inspired?
Yeah, so the path, I kind of took that cue from Japanese design, and then kind of using this sense of scale and different spaces that you can go and kind of seek out refuge. So that's a very Japanese thing, like taking the long path, windy path to a tea house, where you'd get like some sort of view over a Japanese garden or a rice field. And I actually have been to Japan and studied when I was in the landscape architecture program that was part of our study abroad. So I was able to spend 6 weeks there and kind of see all these gardens firsthand.
Amazing.
Yeah, gave me a lot of inspiration.
Yeah, well, you've done a great job of bringing it home.
So this is a real special spot. And so this whole backyard, this was where the lawn used to be, right here in this flat portion.
Okay.
And then this was kind of the overgrown blackberry hill. And then the only thing that has stayed are these two thread branch cypress right here. So there's 2 of them. So everything else, it was pretty much a blank slate there on out, and I've added everything. But this was kind of the opportunity spot that I was trying to get to, where you're protected up there, but you also have this kind of fun view over the top of the house. And so this vine that's covering the structure, is a white wisteria.
Wow.
And you've got this moment in time, and it's usually late April, where that whole thing is just covered in these dripping white racemes of flowers. And it's just like perfumed. It perfumes the whole backyard. It's absolutely incredible.
Oh, amazing. Can we take this
Yeah, let's take
path up?
the path less traveled. Stop and have a little moment in time. So there's a couple of different challenges with this site. One is clay soil. So I had to be very careful not to compact it, and only worked kind of in that real special time when it's after winter but before summer, and the soil is very soft but not sticky.
Oh.
So I did a lot of the heavy construction, bringing in these big boulders during that time. And then drainage, so we're kind of on a downhill slope. So these paths in the backyard actually function as French drains. So underneath all this gravel is some big perforated pipe. So that creates, there's two different sections here where the water is drained into those pipes, just so it's not eroding the hillside during the winter time. The other thing that I'll mention, there are no fences keeping things out of the backyard. So we have deer, tons of deer up here. And that was a huge challenge, not so much for what they eat. So most of these plants are naturally deer resistant, but when the bucks are in velvet, they'll come and they'll just rub their horns on like anything that's substantial. So I've lost so many plants.
Really?
And they'll just like strip the bark off a tree. You can see some up here that are scarred, that have healed. But that's been another big challenge of this
Have you
site.
used a lot of cages?
Cages, and then I've actually sprayed some cayenne pepper mixed with a little bit of pine sap. So that sticks to the leaves and they don't like the smell, and they try to avoid that. So when things were very fresh and first planted, I used that technique as well.
And then are they kind of past that phase of potentially, getting
A lot
rutted?
of things are. Everything's grown in enough. This was like the first section of the garden that I tackled, so this is about 10 years old now. And basically it's kind of like natural selection now. If a plant dies, then it's out of here, and the garden's mature enough to basically hold its own at this point.
Yeah, shed a tear and move on.
Yep, exactly. So these are weeping blue spruce, and this was probably the biggest feature of the backyard. I really wanted a pond, a koi pond, but I didn't want to contend with the leaves and the raccoons and just the mess and all the work. So what this is, if you look here, it starts here with the Candy Can's white fir.
Oh, I see it.
And then the weeping blue spruce is here. And then I'm standing on the bridge. And then it continues down. So this is my blue waterfall that's done with plants and not water.
Oh, I love it. And it's kind of like, rapid because of just the dynamic
it's pretty turbulent
movement of it. Yeah, that is
and I've got this
cool.
one key view from the kitchen sink window, and this stream lines up perfectly with that.
And did you plan it like that?
I did.
Okay.
Yep, that's where I wanted my waterfall. In the springtime, when they push new growth, you can see this is this year's amount of new growth. This comes out this most vibrant kind of powder blue, and it's just really quite a scene in the springtime.
Wow.
It's very obvious what the intended effect was.
Because, the winter or the spring rivers are always a little bit more hectic.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And then the bridge too.
Yeah, just to kind of further enhance like the idea that you're going over water. And so in other seasons, there's a bunch of beautiful tree peonies, which are Chinese, Japanese natives. And so they really kind of add a pop of spring color in here. But ferns, grasses, there's some really beautiful Japanese iris, a bunch of different clumps kind of adds to that grassy effect as well. And they
Okay.
bloom in spring. This is a really fun grass. It's an Acorus ogon, so it's the
Ogon.
yellow sweet flag grass. And these were just little 4-inch pots when I planted them, and they have just taken over. And they love kind of that water that's coming down the hillside, and they just thrive in the wet clay soil.
And I'm glad that they're taking over and you're happy with it.
Yeah, it's a good taking over.
Yeah,
you can see like I've got a drift here, the drift here, and then they'll border the whole path as you.
Yeah, and then this one is adding so much with its height and color.
So that's a flowering cherry called Little Twist.
Oh.
So a real sweet, tiny white pink flower in the springtime, and then this beautiful fall color right now.
Beautiful. And then some really dwarf conifers in this section as well.
Yep.
I love the Korean fir.
Yeah, that's a super dwarf selection called Icebreaker.
Oh.
So it has that really white underside of the needle, and it's almost like twisted. And it only grows like an inch or two a year, so those are pretty old little specimens. So if we walk down here, the design intent was to create this dramatic kind of crescendo of landscape space from the house. So you have this little private courtyard, enjoy a hot tub every now and again, and then boom, you get the tall conifers. I've got these columnar aspen trees right here, so they're turning the beautiful yellow right now in the fall. And I don't know if you've noticed, but this neighborhood has overhead power lines. So kind of part of the consideration also for the columnar conifers was to grow something that can give me a lot of height without interfering with those power lines.
Okay.
So it's kind of a double feature.
And so that really affected how you planted too, huh?
So right underneath of them, like I had to make sure I wasn't getting anything that was going to grow too tall. And then the things that are beside them, I had to make sure it's not a full-size tree that's going to get too wide.
Is this Shiroshiki?
Yes, so the lion's head, Japanese maple, Acer palmatum, Shishigira.
Beautiful. And will that get much bigger, do you know?
So they will. That was actually kind of an impulse plant before the aspens were there to give me a little bit more privacy from the hot tub because the neighboring house up there, I just didn't have that privacy yet. So that actually went in, not originally as planned, but nevertheless a beautiful tree.
And then it just like adds to this, you have this whole habitat here.
Yeah, so this is probably one of my favorite little spaces. So these pitcher plants, the Darlingtonias, are really beautiful chartreuse green in the springtime, and they thrive in the wet, kind of boggy environment of the fountain.
And then the dragonfly too. Is that your original dragonfly you were telling us about?
The original dragonfly sculpture that caught my attention and I just had to have for the garden, done by an artist on Salt Spring Island. Great. And then these are a couple, I've got some glass cattails kind of further enhancing the boggy vibe. And then this is Blue Star Creeper. So this ground cover is a carpet of little tiny blue flowers in springtime. And then this vine that's lost its foliage, this is more of the Virginia creeper. So my way of disguising this kind of all right looking concrete wall was with this vine, and it's lush green throughout the growing seasons. I've kind of trained it across those steps, and so it's growing on this companion wall over here. But a great way to add a green screen texture to a concrete surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And then these giant ferns are such a good choice for this spot too.
Yeah, again, kind of making that another layer to that space. And then I've got these Pacific Fire vine maples. So it's our native vine maple, but this particular variety has the red stems. So you kind of get that pop of red during the winter
beautiful.
after the tree loses its leaves.
Do you have, I haven't noticed many containers, I guess a few down there. And
There's
then,
a few.
And then just this little guy here.
Yeah. I used to have some bigger trees that just got too big, and that
Oh.
just got replanted this year. And this is the black,
The black scalapajuga.
and then this is the dwarf ilex called green pagoda, I
Oh,
believe.
beautiful.
Another one of my favorite bushes is the winter sun mahonia.
Okay.
I really love its evergreen shape, and then what's most special about it, I think, is that when it blooms, which is kind of winter and it's just starting now, it's great food for the hummingbirds. So like I've got a pair that kind of they will come and use the fountain every morning, kind of right there next to the hot tub, and then I like to think of this as their food source during the winter, keeping them around.
Oh,
So
that's lovely. And so much easier than, refilling a hummingbird feeder.
exactly.
Do you have to cut these back or
So
maintain these at all?
when we've had that really hard cold weather and when we get snow, sometimes these will break. And I'll just go back and I'll cut it back to a stalk, and boom, it'll send out new shoots.
Oh.
So they're a very resilient, very hardy shrub.
And they're a little pokey, right?
Little pokey, yep. Yep, that's part of the deer resistant landscape.
Oh, right.
So if it pokes us, it's gonna poke them too.
That's good to remember. I love the shape of this. Is this another white pine?
So this is actually a Japanese red pine called densiflora. So it creates this umbrella shape. It's a multi-stem, and as the tree ages, it's supposed to get this more red exfoliating bark.
Oh, okay. I see it starting.
Kind of when I planted it, it was shorter and almost a tabletop. So it was cultured that way, and I've been letting it kind of grow, and I thin out kind of the dieback that's happening that's needing to have that done again.
What's the hardest part about maintaining a garden such as this one?
So this garden is actually, it's very low maintenance for the summer and kind of into the dry part of spring. Where it does have maintenance is coming into this season. I like to clean up the leaves, which you wouldn't have to do, but then you're kind of cutting back the perennials and the grasses. And at that time, I decide, all right, this tree needs to be thinned out. I'm tromping around in the dirt. Let's get in there and clean that tree out at the same time. And then along that note, the wisteria is actually the highest maintenance plant in the garden. I have to trim that one once in the spring and then once in the winter. It's an extremely vigorous grower, but I like to think that it's worth the extra work.
Yeah, I mean, just the way you talk about it, it
Yeah.
sounds like it's really special.
Yeah,
And I'll
that's
have to
really
get
cool.
some pictures of that to include.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
So I'm just so grateful that you invited us to come over the fence and appreciate this beautiful Japanese-inspired garden. So thank you so much, Chauncey.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was
Yeah,
a pleasure
thank
having you
you.
here.